And I'm back again. I hope everyone had a good Christmas and a good New Year's. I have not uploaded anything to my channel for quite a while since my computer broke down. I have a new computer now, so I can actually start making videos again. And just as a sort of test episode, I am making this video because the last video I made that was similar to this became very popular and very seen on my channel, so why not make another one? Now, what I thought we were going to do for this episode here is build a web page design inside Adobe Experience Design, which is the software I used for the last video as well. I had a lot of questions about it, so I'm just going to try and answer some of the questions about this software as we're getting into it and how it actually works, and just sort of explain what it is meant for, because Adobe has a lot of different software, so figuring out what exactly you can do with Experience Design is something that might need a little explanation. So, like I said, we're going to build a web page design. We're not going to build an entirely website because that is a little bit too much for one episode. We're just going to focus on one page and just designing it. We're not going to build it in programming afterwards. We might do it in another episode, and if I'm going to do that, I will also leave a link for it in the description. But for now, I'm just focused on creating this web page design. As you can see, I have Experience Design open here, and Experience Design is not a software that allows for you to create websites. It is actually a software that is meant for creating prototypes for websites, and after you create a web design inside this software, you can export it into a sort of little application that you can send to your client, and they can then click on buttons inside the little test prototype you have, and then they can actually see when pages change inside the the website, and actually see menus popping out and that sort of thing. So it is a prototyping tool that you can also use to design websites in. A lot of people use Photoshop, that is also an option. You can also use Illustrator, which is also an option. But this design tool here is just much faster and much more simple. So if you don't want to learn a really complicated software like Photoshop, which isn't really that complicated, but for people who've never tried it before, it might be complicated, then this one is a great place to start. Inside the software, you can see we have different options down here at the bottom, just to quickly get started. We can even see if we want other formats of these different options. So if we want something web related, then I can choose what sort of size I want it to be. I'm just gonna go and stick with the standard here, which is 1920 by 1080. And in here, a lot of times I want to sort of, take my browser into account, because the artboard that we have here doesn't match the size of your browser. It actually matches the size of your screen. So what we need to do before we get started, and I do actually have a browser open here, which I'm going to talk about in just a second, is I'm just going to go ahead and take a small screenshot. So I'm just going to snip out this monitor here using the built-in Windows 10 snipping tool. So the first thing I do when I want to design a website, and again, there's a process behind designing a website. You have to first of all do a mock-up in some kind of application, so you do have an idea about where elements are going to be inside your design. It's not just opening up, let's say, Adobe Experience Design, then start making a design. There's meeting with your client, there's talking about what they want to have on the website, their expectation to the website. There's a lot of things going on here with the client, and then afterwards, based on what they want for their website, you have to draw up a mock-up of what they sort of gave you of information, and then you need to show them the mock-up, and then you need to get a approval in order to actually start making the design for the website, and then you can actually start getting into Experience Design, that sort of thing. I'm gonna skip that process because we don't have an actual client here, and I do sort of have an idea about what I want to make in this episode. So like I said, this is not going to be a full design process walkthrough. This is just going to be me designing a web page inside Experience Design here. But besides that, we do still have a little bit of preparations we need to do for ourselves in order to actually get this working properly. I'm going to go inside my browser, and I'm just going to use this tool, which you guys already saw because I screenshot it. And this is going to be a tool to help us sort of get the right color combination for the website. We need to have sort of an idea about what sort of content goes on our website to sort of figure out where it needs to be placed and how user-friendly it needs to be. If we have a, let's say, artistic sort of portfolio that we want to show off to people, then we can do a little bit of creative things when it comes to illustrating the content inside the website. But because I want to build something that is going to be, did I say streaming service earlier? I meant to say video production service, like people that makes videos for companies and that sort of thing. That's what I want to build in this episode here. I think I might have said streaming services. Either way, we need to have some sort of idea about what colors we want to use inside the website and what sort of elements and content that goes on the website. So for the sort of color combination, I have a website here called color.adobe.com. I know there's a lot of different free applications you can use in order to get color combinations, but I know there's people sitting out there that doesn't have Photoshop and other sort of software you need to pay for. So this is a great free option if you want to choose some kind of color combination. So using this color wheel here, we can actually go and pick a color. I already sort of did, so we can just sort of pick these colors here. But just to sort of illustrate, if I were to go over here and change the color harmony like it says, then we can choose something that might be complementary, which is when colors are opposite from one another. So we can say, well, I want something to be red, therefore I also need to have green inside, you know, my website if I want it to be complementary. And then it sort of gives you the direct opposite of the red you chose, and you know, vice versa, if that's how you say it. So picking a color, I'm just going to stick with monochromatic, which is when we choose something based off the same color. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose what I chose before again, which might be around here-ish. One thing I'm sort of going for here is not to have too vibrant colors, which is when the colors are too saturated. So I want something to be a little bit professional because it is a video production service that I'm trying to build here that makes videos for like companies and larger firms and that sort of thing. So I say it a lot, don't I? That sort of thing. I just have sort of tics that I say because I speak English. So with this chosen, we can actually see both the RGB colors and the hex colors that we can actually copy and paste inside Adobe Experience Design in order to get the proper colors. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a regular square creating tool, which you can see over on the side here. Now, one thing you might notice is that we don't actually have a lot of tools, which is because Experience Design is not a, a graphical creation tool or software that you can use in order to create graphic elements. It is a tool mainly made for mockups of prototypes, so we don't need to have that many options in here, which is great if you don't like to have something complicated. I just created a navigation bar here that is 80 pixels high. You can actually see the height of it over here. So I'm just going to go ahead and stick with this. I don't want it to be too tall because I don't want it to hide content underneath it. I might even make it transparent. That might be an idea. So I'm going to just play around with that for a little bit once we get to the rest of the content. So I'm going to remove the border because I don't want to have a border. I am going to make this a darker background color. Now, I don't like picking completely black because it's a very strong color for people looking at background colors. So the only examples I would actually make any sort of thing completely black, as in 0000000 in the hex code, is when I choose text inside the website. Now with this, if I want to somehow later make it transparent, then I will make it completely black, because once we make it transparent, you'll notice that it starts turning lighter gray. So if we choose a light gray or a dark gray, and we make it even more transparent, then it's going to turn into a much brighter gray. So making it transparent, I might actually keep it at completely black. So I'm gonna keep this for now. It is slightly transparent now. And I'm gonna go ahead and start putting in the different, the menu items, and maybe a call to action button at the side, because an important element when it comes to creating websites is to make the user do stuff. So a call to action button is a great way to do that. So starting out, I'm just gonna go ahead and sort of try and build something that could be a place for a logo. I think making that non-transparent might be something we could do. Again, I'm just sort of experimenting here. So I'm just gonna try out some different things. I might even make it like this because it looks kind of cool. So we could have, let's say, a company name. I didn't even think of a company name before I started this episode. So we could make something like, I'm just gonna go ahead and choose Vid Creators, which is, might not be the best name, but I'm just gonna go with something that could be something. So I'm just gonna go ahead and change the font type of it to Roboto. That is a very good font that I like to use. It is very simplistic in its, look to it. So I'm just gonna keep that one for now when it comes to company names and just basic content inside the website. It has sort of become a trend in 2019 to use a sort of, I'm trying to figure out what the font type is called that I'm trying to remember, but I can't remember it. So when it looks like sort of this, which is not as neat and square looking, but more of a what do you call it, Times New Roman-ish kind of style to it, that is sort of becoming a trend in 2019 when it comes to websites. So that is something to sort of watch out for. But I'm just gonna go and keep this for now. So I'm just gonna center it. As you can see, it has a very good tool for when it comes to centering text and elements inside the artboard. So with this chosen, I'm just gonna go and change the color of it. Now let's actually try and experiment with having something that is completely black as a dark background here that is not transparent. Maybe not completely black, but something along those lines. So if I were to choose something that looks like this, then I can go ahead, when I put content below it, see that this section over here is not transparent and this one over here is transparent. I'm just gonna go ahead and make the vid creators completely white, and then I'm just gonna create a menu on the side here. So I'm just gonna say something like, okay, so I think I have some sort of menu here. I just sort of tried to write something really quick that could actually make sense for a company like this. So we have our cases, what we do, who we are, and it should not be the same size as the logo over here, because then they sort of melt together, which we don't want to do. So we could either make this thinner or we could make it a different size, and 28 pixels is quite large. So let's go ahead and size that down to maybe, let's say 20 pixels, which might be a little bit too small, but we're just gonna start with that and then see where it sort of takes us. We could also make it a little bit lighter. So instead of regular, we could choose a light sort of font, which I think is better. We could also make the logo here much thicker because it is sort of a thin font. So something like this to give sort of a little bit of contrast between the logo and our menu items. Now, just to give a small tip for people who want to design but are not feeling like they're very good at it, is to sort of take a look at what they have so far and just see if something seems unbalanced. Because right now you're going to notice that we have a lot of content on the left side, but we don't have any content on the right side. So we need to have some kind of content that balances out the website when it comes to the structure. So there's actually a few design rules that are taught in school when it comes to taking a university degree, when it comes to design and just in general creating websites. So there is some tips that I could make a video for and just sort of give out some hints there. We need to have sort of the same distance on the right side as on the logo over here. So let's go ahead and switch that out to, let's actually go and see what what we have from the side here. This actually says 40 pixels. So we're just going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to move it all the way to the side and then move it 40 pixels towards the center. So now what I want to do is I want to choose some kind of color for the background of this button here. And I'm going to choose one of the colors that we sort of went with in here. So let's try out this one on the side. If I can actually copy it, there we go. It's because when you highlight it, it has a dark background behind it. So it's a little tough to see. But let's go in here and try and see how it looks like. And as you can see, we get something here, and it might be a little bit too close to the same color as the background there. It's not really popping out, and we want a call to action button to pop out and get noticed as soon as people enter the website. So let's go and go back and choose maybe the center color here, which might be better, and then go in and change it. So here we can get something that is much better, because now you can actually see it, and you will in fact click it when you enter as a customer, hopefully. I think we chose 20 pixels for that font size over here, so let's go ahead and try that out here as well. But instead, we're going to make sure we have a very bold text going on. Now I'm just sort of noticing that the button is a little bit too long, but it's also very bright. So it sort of fades in with the text that we have inside the button. So we need to figure out how to change that so we don't have it fade in with the text. Okay, so instead of going inside the color wheel, I decided to just change the color directly inside Adobe Experience Design because it's easier to see once you can actually preview it live when you're actually changing the color. So I'm going to choose the color that I went for here, and I'm going to paste it inside the color wheel of Adobe Experience Design. So I'm just going to paste it in here and see what changes when it comes to the color. So this is apparently our new color scheme when it comes to the website. That's one way to do it if you want to sort of have a hack for it. Again, when you choose colors when you start out, it might not always work out for you. In some cases, the client has some colors that they want you to go with because it matches their logo or something like that. In those sort of cases, you just have to sort of design around the colors. Whereas in this case here, we have the option to just sort of choose the colors that we want to choose. So I'm just going to choose the color that goes with the background and the text that I chose here. So now we can actually see everything. We might even make it rounded, so we have a button that isn't completely square, because as you'll notice, we have a square box here, we have a square box here, so why not have something that breaks it a little bit. One thing I want to point out here as well is that I did consider making everything uppercase, but when it becomes uppercase, it also becomes less user-friendly in some cases. So uppercase and cases, see what I did there? But you need to consider if it becomes user-friendly using the font and using this, the font size, and just in general, if the user can actually better read what exactly you want them to read inside the website. So if I were to take this and just sort of copy it over and make it uppercase instead, let's go and see how that looks like. So as you can see, I now have made it uppercase, and if we were to compare it, it could potentially work out. So let's actually try and move it in and see what it does to our website. Now, it might actually be better to have it uppercase, because I can definitely read what is going on here. So the only way to sort of test out if one thing is better than the other is to have a small usability test, have a couple of people test it out to see what do they think about having it uppercase, what do they think about having it lowercase. Again, it's not just about designing a website and then saying to the customer or the client that this is the design. You have to actually test it out to see what the usability is like on your website by having different people come in and actually try it. So this is what the software is for, because when you present this prototype that you get from this software to people, they can much easier interact with it rather than just looking at pictures, because you don't want to create a website and actually program it if you don't have a proper design yet. So this is what this tool is really good for. So I'm just going to go ahead and change the get in touch as well, because I think we need to keep it uppercase. Get in touch. And this might actually change how we need to change the font in here, because right now it is quite large. So we need to expand it again, which might be a little bit too much. Now, one thing I'm trying to look for here is, does this side over here become heavier than the other side? Because this gives off a certain heaviness to it, whereas over here, because everything gets so big now, it is also becoming very heavy, and we don't want the website to feel like it's tilting to one side. So I might change this back again to being lower. No, it has to be uppercase if that over here is uppercase. Okay, so I decided to instead make the font a little bit not as bold, a little bit thinner, so it didn't become as blobby and big. So I think this is good for now. The next thing I want to do is I want to have a picture in the background, because I want to have some kind of visual element that a person can actually look at when they enter the website. And I have a website where we can use in order to download free stock photos shared by photographers around the world, called pexels.com. So I went ahead and already searched for video inside the search field, and I think I'm going to try and pick something out in here that I like that we could put in as a background, like this one down here. I might actually have already found something. One thing to note about when choosing pictures is that you don't want too much color differences inside the picture, because when people enter the website, they might get introduced by a huge white piece of text or something, and if you have a background picture with white inside of it, or just bright colors and then dark colors, then the text is going to fade in and out on top of the background. So you want to make sure you have something that is pretty monotone when it comes to the lighting and the colors used. So this might actually work out. Let's go ahead and download it and test it out inside our design. I don't regret having the transparent background here. I could actually try out making just a little bit more transparent. So let's make it 80 pixels instead of 90. So now we can actually see some of the stuff that's going on in the background here. The next thing I want to do is I do actually want to give the background here a sort of overlay, because I don't want it to be a very, very clear background that is visible to us. I want it to be more of a decorative. So I want to take another one of these square draw tools that we have over here, draw on top of it, move it back just a little bit to make sure we have it right before the background, and then I want to change it into something like a color. So I'm just going to choose something that might seem bluish. Again, we could actually go into the website here where we have our color wheel and choose something. So let's pick something that is pretty dark, like this one. I'm going to change the color combination, and then I'm just going to go ahead and make it a little bit transparent. So we have something that sort of goes on top of it. Again, we don't really know how transparent it needs to be right now, but as we start putting in content inside the website, we can actually tell what we want it to be. Now, I would actually have preferred to put the photo inside Photoshop and then make a blend layer in order to have the color fade in a little bit more with the background, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'm just going to try and stick with this that we have here. Now, one thing I'm noticing is that the color is actually very bright in comparison to what we have up here inside the call to action button. So going back inside the color wheel, I need to see if we can actually get something like this one over here that doesn't have as much blue inside of it. So I'm just going to go back and change the color into something that might be a lot better. And this needs to be a little bit buffed up. So 90%. Now looking at how this is turning out, I might actually not have our edges here completely round. So let's just go ahead and make it just slightly like so. I think this might be better because I think the website is sort of developing into something that is very structured compared to fluid. So let's try and make it into a structured design. I think that's also why this side over here might be a little bit off balanced, because it has fluid elements like rounded corners, whereas the other side over here is very square. Even now when we made the text completely capitalized, it became even more square. So we need to stick with a sort of theme here. Now let's go ahead and make the background image a little bit darker as well, because I think it's still too visible for when it comes to putting content on top of it. So let's go ahead and make a dark or completely black overlay and then just sort of fade it down. It has to be moved down, of course, because right now we are way on top of all the different layers that we have here. So let's just go and shift it back. So with this done, we can actually start putting content inside the page here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw out some, since this is a video production service, I think we should have a video on the front page that actually have the people of the company talking about what exactly they do, or maybe some kind of trailer or teaser for the different videos or cases they've done in the past. So let's go ahead and draw out something that could be a video. Now, usually there's a specific format when it comes to having a video, such as 1920 by 1080 or 2K or 4K and that sort of thing. But there's just a sort of ratio you have to maintain. And I think we're going to try and do something a little bit more creative here by making a video that's a little bit wider than it is tall in its ratio, because that might be something that would be kind of cool for a video producer to have. Now, again, this is just a prototype, so we don't need to be very, very specific when it comes to the pixels and that sort of thing. Of course, later, if we were to hand this design over to a programmer, they want to have exact measurements. But for now, since we're just doing something for ourselves, I'm not going to concern myself too much with the actual width and height and that sort of thing. So let's go and make this one 600 pixels in width. And let's try and keep it like this for now. I'm just going to go ahead and move it around a little bit, have it centered for now, and maybe have some text going on below it. So let's go ahead and take the text tool, which is over here, and draw something. Let's have some text. And because I don't have actual text to put under here, let's actually go and stick with some lorem we're going to put some text. And I'm just going to go ahead and go into the website called lipsum.com. So I'm going to say lipsum.com. And as you can see, we get to this web page that generates lorem ipsum text. So I'm just going to generate something, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy, let's say, this little paragraph up here. We don't need a lot of text, so I'm just going to copy a little bit, and then I'm going to paste it in below here. Now, when it comes to having a paragraph inside a website, you need to really consider spacing. This is something that I see a lot of people, they forget when they design websites, because it's something that you have to actively tell yourself to do when you design text inside a website. Because right here you might think, well, this is perfectly fine. Maybe we could actually change the thickness of the font. But in actuality, right now, the text is very crammed together when it comes to line spacing. So we need to move it away from each other quite a bit. And as you can see, it's already making a huge difference in the text in here. Now, we don't want too much of a distance, so let's go ahead and keep it at 30 and try that one out for now. Now, when it comes to spacing from the top, again, we need to think about spacing. A lot of people, again, like to put things crammed together, but when it comes to making websites and making designs, you need to think about having air going around the elements, because it doesn't become as chunked together and confusing and messy to look at. So let's go ahead and move it down a little bit. Then the next thing I want to do is I want to have some kind of introductory text over here on the right side. So I'm just going to make another paragraph. I'm just going to go ahead and shift it and draw some kind of size. Now we should probably have some kind of wrapper going on inside the website that sort of determines how wide our content should be, but that is something I'm going to concern myself with a little bit later. For now, I'm just going to focus on being creative and just drawing things out, and then afterwards I'm going to sort of translate it into something a bit more technical that the programmers, when you hand off the design to the programmers, can actually use in order to create some kind of design. So here, I'm just going to change the font size because it needs to be quite large. So let's use something like 90 pixels. It did not change anything here. I thought so because it wasn't changing in there. So let's say 90, and there we go. Now it just seems like it's cutting off a little bit, but that might just be a glitch inside the software. So let's just go ahead and write something, and as you can see when I click out from it, it's fine. So I went ahead and wrote, "We make professional films," but I need to add some spacing to it because as you can see, we can't really see what's going on here. So let's add 100 pixels as spacing just for now. Let's make this a little bit more bold because I think it needs to be bold in order to really stand out. This is a really important text to have inside the website. Might even make it black because that is a lot thicker. And we also need to have a little bit more line spacing. As you can see, the F and the P sort of going together. So I'm just going to add maybe 120 as this, the line height. So having this might actually still be, it might be a little bit too much actually. Let's go ahead and size it down to 112. There we go. So now that we have this, we need to concern ourselves with the spacing on the side here, and also sort of figure out if we want the W to start at the top or if we want it to just sort of start as it is right here. I do actually want it to start from the top so it aligns with the video, and then I'm just going to move it over so it matches, a little bit of distance here in the middle. Looking at this, I would actually might want the text to be a little bit larger because I've shifted it over a little bit, but it is not really standing out as much as I wanted to. So let's go ahead and increase the size of it and just go ahead and do it manually over here until we find something we like maybe 110. So let's make it 122 in line height. That is not big enough. So let's make it 126, and that might be good. Now, as I'm looking at this, it does sort of seem like the text down here inside the paragraph is sort of fading away because it's so tiny and so unimportant that people are not going to read it. So let's go ahead and shorten down the text because a lot of text is going to make people not read it. So we're going to shorten it into something in probably half the size, and then we're going to go ahead and just buff up the font size to make sure people actually read it. So maybe something around the lines of 26 pixels, which might be a little bit too big because we also need to consider we have a menu up here. I'm still a bit uncertain about the line spacing, but I do think we can stick with this for now. If not, then let's return to it later when we do have a bigger picture to look at. So with this, I do think we could do something about the design here. I'm gonna go ahead and wait with that, and then I'm just gonna go ahead and make a sort of call to action button down here when it comes to, let's say, watching the video that might be up here or something. We should probably have something up here to indicate this is in fact a video. So I'm going back inside Pexels. I'm just trying to find some kind of corporate picture we can use in order to illustrate that this is a corporate video or something that people can actually click on. So let's go ahead and stick with something that actually can be seen, because remember, we have a very dark background here and we need to make sure the video is still noticeable, but not like this one over here, like a dark picture, because we need to have a thumbnail for the video. The only thing that's so bad about these stock photos is that they look so stock photo-like. They don't look like they have personality. They don't look like they were taken from, like, pictures taken from actual people from inside this company here. They seem very superficial. Is that what you call it? When it's like surface looking, but not personal. Okay, so I think we're going to go with this picture here. This is some of the best I could find with stock photos because they look, like I said, impersonal. But let's go and use this one and actually drag it in to our video square inside our design here. So I'm just going to drag it in, and as you can see, it sort of adjusts itself to the size of it. We could change it a little bit. Now that I'm looking at it, it is actually not a good picture to use because there's too much stuff going on it. We need to have another thumbnail. Okay, so this is another photo that I've actually used before from inside this website when I made my my HTML course on my channel. So I'm going to use the same photo here, and I'm going to crop it a little bit because if I were to just paste this inside our design, you're gonna actually notice that we get the same effect as before. There's too much spacing over here, and there's just too many things going on inside the photo. So let's go ahead and crop it down a little bit. I don't know exactly what the size is for this we have in here, so let's just test it out. It's 600 times 285, so let's go ahead and make that into a new thing. I think I'm gonna go ahead and just have it lean over to the side here because we want to have as much as his computer as possible. So I think this right here might actually be good. So let's go ahead and export that and use it inside our design. And as you can see, that made a big difference. So now we have something that could potentially be used. It doesn't really match with the color scheme when it comes to the rest of the website. So let's actually go ahead and put something like a filter on top of this photo here to make sure that it does actually match up with the website. So now we have a call to action button. I just increased the height of it a little bit because it might be better that way. But as you can see, again, taking a look at the design, it is very unbalanced because everything is leaning to the left side now. So we need to move around the elements a little bit to make sure that what we have here is properly aligned inside our, the page when they enter the website. So what I might actually do, just to sort of make this balanced, is to move this over here and create some spacing for it. So we're gonna shift it down to maybe around here to have the call to action button on the side. Now I'm going to create some more text that is going to be in between the call to action button and the huge chunk of text we have here, because I think we need to have something in between here to sort of increase the spacing of the call to action button. Again, this is just something I come up with very quickly. So again, figuring out what text goes inside the website is also something that you're usually going to have before you start designing. Usually you're going to sit down with the customer or the client, and they're going to tell you, well, we want this to be said inside the website. This is going to be on the front page, and we want this to be on the cases page. And then you can sort of argue with them whether or not that is a good idea. But they usually have text that they're going to give you in order to put content inside the website, because you can't design a website without knowing what content is going to go on there. So for now, I'm just going to stick with made up text that I'm making on the spot. But usually you would actually have text going on beforehand. Just going to shorten this down. Let's make sure we don't delete anything. And the call to action button is just going to get moved down slightly. Let's go ahead, and we don't want to bring it too far down because otherwise you can't really see the call to action button or the paragraph because they're fading too close together. So we're not going to have the same distance here. So this right here might actually be good. Let's make sure we can actually see this paragraph over here. So let's go and do a little trick that I usually like to do when I make these sort of paragraphs, which is to create a line that is going to have a certain, thickness to it. So I'm just going to go and move it down and make it into one of the blue colors that we like to have on our website. It shouldn't be the same colors, I think. We could try it and see how that works out. So I'm just going to go ahead and copy that color, create not have a border, and make sure it is maybe not 8 pixels but 6 pixels wide. And then we just want to make sure our content gets the proper distance that it needs from that little thing we just created. And again, the cool thing about that I'm the author of this website and I can actually, create whatever text I want to create, is that I can just go ahead and add more text if I want to, if it fits my design here. So I think this right here might actually be good. I mean, we could also change it back here. That's actually more harmonical. So let's play around with having this. Okay, so I went ahead and made a few changes here, and I know I added another line of text, but I went ahead and deleted it again because I didn't think it fit in with the content we had here. We could also, if that piece of text was important, we could add it inside the paragraph down here, but harmonical, or harmony-wise, it didn't really fit into the design. So I'm going to take what we have here so far, and I want to have it as a certain distance from the top up here, because we don't want it to have it too far down and not too far up to the top. So as you can see, I just shifted it up a little bit. I also centered the content horizontally to make sure that it didn't go too far to one side. So Now that we have this, we could go ahead and add some other content below here just for now, because we can always return to the design later on if we want to. So looking at what we have on the website already, or at least inside the web page here, you can see we already sort of told the people that we had cases. Go ahead and check them out here. The next thing we want them to do is to contact us if they liked our cases. So at the bottom here, I would like to have some kind of call to action contact form that allow for them to get in contact with us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create something like an additional section here. And I'm just going to go ahead and make sure it matches up with what we have at the bottom here, because we do have a taskbar that we need to make sure we can still see, because otherwise it's not really a realistic view on how the web page is going to look like. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure it's like that. And I might even keep it white, because I like the white color down here, just to have something that breaks the rest of the design. If we were to remove it, you can see we have a lot of the same, and it just looks like Whereas if we were to take the white part here and add it up here, suddenly we have a lot more stuff going on inside the website. So what I need to do is I need to have a call to action button again, and I don't want it to be the same color as these up here. So I'm just going to create a short paragraph here that says something along the lines of, contact us if you want to have a video made, we can do it for you, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to center it because that's important. Also make sure that it is centered over here inside my settings. And I'm just going to go and move it into the center. And I want this to be quite large. I don't want it to be the same size as this over here, because then it fades in together. I might actually have a paragraph underneath here. So let's just copy it down. That should actually be the same size as the text size over here. And let's go ahead and make sure we make this larger. So I'm also trying to get the call to action button down here. I'm already designing the call to action button because I think it's important to have. So I'm just going to go ahead and make sure that we have it popping up here. Now I'm just going to go ahead and copy some more lorem ipsum text, because I do believe we just need to put some kind of text in here as a placeholder. So let's go ahead and do that and actually move it down so it looks like we want it to. Now this might be a little bit too much. Now one issue we have here is the fact that we have a lot of spacing going on between the lines, and because it's matching up with what we have up here, we need to make adjustments to that. So let's go ahead and make sure this text is slightly smaller, because if we change the text size, it allows for us to change the line height as well. If we were to have the text size the same as up here, right below the video, then we need to sort of stick to a theme and have it consistent, meaning that we need to have the same line height. So this is sort of a small trick you can do in order to change up the line height without messing up the design for the rest of the website. So having it like that, and then making sure we move down the call to action button like so. Now, of course, we're sort of walking into something here where it's starting to pop underneath the actual page. So we could also expand our page if we want to, just to have a little bit more. I want it to be just enough for the actual design here to fit. So let's go ahead and do that, like so. Now again, I just want to make sure that people, they know that they can actually get in touch by going down here and clicking the get in touch button. That will take them into a get in touch page. We're probably going to have some kind of page up here that actually allow for them to contact us. That should probably have been added inside the menu up here. So let's actually go and do that. So contact us. So this link down here would actually take them in there. Now what we want to make sure we do as well is we take another look at the website. Because if I were to, let's make sure that's centered. If I were to take a look at the design here, there's a few things that I notice. The first thing is that we have a lot of blue colors. There's blue up here, there's blue down there, and there's blue down here, sort of going in a straight line. Again, you have to look at the whole picture. And because we have that, and only we have that small blue line over here, everything becomes sort of unbalanced again, because it feels like it's leaning to the right side. So this color down here actually needs to be changed into something else. So going back to what we have up here, let's go ahead and try out something maybe a little bit darker. So we're going to copy that and paste it inside as our color for the button. So that right there might actually do something. It might be a little bit too much, so we need to sort of consider that. We could even go so far to make it the same color as we have up here, just to make sure we have something that matches up. That might actually be a lot better. So instead of using blue all the way or a darker shade of blue, we're just going to go and stick with one color here to make everything just match up a little bit better. The last thing I want to do is I want to make sure that this circle here that I'm using for the play button, if you actually notice it inside the design, it does sort of break the whole square theme we have going on. We have squares, squares, and then we have this weird circle, like we have some kind of weird video play inside the website that doesn't match the design. So let's actually go and make sure we change that as well. Okay, so I think we have something here to start with. Again, a design process is about making a design, step away from your computer, return after a few hours, and then see if there's any sort of changes you want to make to it. But the main purpose of this video was sort of to give you guys an idea about what sort of mindset you need to have when you design something like this, if you have a hard time when it comes to designing websites. Because I know there's people out there that don't really have an easy time being creative and coming up with designs. And a lot of the things you're going to notice about me when I sit here and design is that I take a lot of design rules into use when I want to design my website, whereas some other people who are just naturally creative just sort of, shove colors and stuff on their website and it just looks good. But someone like me who is not naturally gifted when it comes to being creative just sort of have to use some different design rules when it comes to how to set up the structure and how to make sure the proximity of the elements are closely together or far apart from one another, make sure things are consistent, make sure things are balanced, that sort of thing. There's just some small tricks that I use in order to make sure I can actually design something that looks somewhat professional like what I have here. I'm not saying this is really professional, but it is a good starting point to something that might turn out really professional at some later point. So this is how a design is made and the sort of mindset that goes behind it. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.